Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us again to the Learning from Leaders series. Today, we have the immense privilege to welcome Ms. Hedblom, the CEO and President of Epiroc. And I don't know if I still need to present him, but longtime contributor and author of Before I Was a CEO, Peter Vanham. Peter, the floor is all yours.
Thank you so much, Luc, and it's good to be back, of course, for our new Learning from Leaders conference. It's a very exciting conference. We have joining Helena Hedblom. She's the CEO of Epiroc, and she'll be talking to us today about many things, about her career, about her life story, all the things she learned. But of course, as many of us around the world are still in lockdown and are worried about the coronavirus, we want to start by asking a few questions, Helena, if we may, about the COVID-19 crisis and how it affects your business. But before I do ask you that first question, Helena, I think it's important that you tell us a little bit more about Epiroc, because Epiroc, of course, is a very big company. It is listed on NASDAQ, which is the technology and other listed companies index. Headquarters in the United States. So it is a big company, it's an important company, and it does mining equipment. Now, most of our students, of course, don't really every day do mining. So could you tell us a little bit more about what it is that Epiroc does first?
Sure. So great to meet you all. So Epiroc is one of the leading productivity provider, a manufacturer of mining and infrastructure equipment. We have equipment for surface mining, for underground mining, and for infrastructure.
Very well. So I understand if you go to a mine somewhere in the world, South Africa, India, China, wherever it may be, and they're drilling a rock, they're excavating the mine, quite likely the equipment that they're using is from Epiroc.
Absolutely. We have sales in 150 countries, so we are all over the place.
Wow, that's really impressive. I don't think I'll ever go to 150. How many countries have you traveled to, by the way, you think, Helena?
It's not 150, but I've actually been in most of the countries where we have sales, so it's quite a lot.
Yeah, and of course, the last couple of months, like most of us, you've been locked down. You haven't been traveling, I assume, locked down in Sweden. Now, the situation in Sweden is quite special, isn't it? Because there is officially not a lockdown in Sweden. Where are you now, and how is your life? Is it normal? Or are you affected as well?
No, I think we also in Sweden, all white collars, for example, in the company are working from home. Myself and my executive team, we have still been in the office. We need to be and lead the company also in difficult times, but we have all white collars working from home. But of course, we try to keep, our manufacturing entities as well as our distribution centers for the aftermarket up running.
Yeah, Helena. Now, of course, the corona crisis is a humanitarian crisis. It's a global health emergency. A lot of people around the world have been infected, have gotten sick, have died. And then in addition to that, it's also becoming an economic crisis. Yeah. And many companies around the world have to figure out how they deal with that crisis, how they stay operational and how they keep on making money, or at least have some revenues to keep their employees on board and the operations going. How do you deal with that? And how does your prior experience being in the mining sector, how does it help?
No, so I think you need to be clear on your priorities. For us, the aftermarket is close to 75% of our business, and that is how we also have prioritized in this crisis now, to be able to support our customers to keep their operation up running. Then, as you say, we are used to cyclical business environment, and usually, but the cyclicality in mining usually takes, it's 3 years to reach the bottom, and then it can quickly go up. I think what we have seen now is, of course, big swings, based on the health crisis. So things that usually takes 3 years can take 2 weeks.
Yeah, and of course, when you say you're used to the cyclical nature of business, you mean that in mining, a couple of years things go really well, and then a couple of years later things go really badly. That's the cyclical nature of mining, as they call it.
when it comes to equipment, I would say, the capex investment in mining is cyclical. The actual production in mining is actually quite stable, and that of course what gives Epiroc the stability over a cycle. Our large portion of business related to the aftermarket.
Yeah, but of course, in the last decade or so, or the last 2 decades, we had what was called a mega cycle in mining, where for a good number of years things went really well, emerging markets mostly, the rise of them, and then things started to go down and unravel really. And so you have the experience of leading a company both in good times but also in bad times, and so that's what gives you the confidence that you'll be able to get through this as well. You're saying what happened to me before, in maybe 4 or 5 years, or you said 3 years, that downturn, I've had that downturn before. The difference is now it's happening in a matter of 2 months.
No, so I think, as an executive team, you need to do different scenario plannings. You need to plan for different scenarios, and then you just need to decide to believe in something, right or wrong, and then execute according to that scenario. And I think most management teams sit in that situation right now. You need to believe in something. Where will this end up? When the health crisis is over, where will the supply demand be after that?
Yeah, because obviously at some point you must assume things will go back to normal, or a new normal. And the question is mostly, how long will that take? And in the meanwhile, how much will things fluctuate? Will there be a second wave? Will the virus be concentrated in one part of the world or in another part of the world? Now we're seeing the epicenter has moved to emerging markets. You're very active in emerging markets, countries like Brazil, for example, and other Latin American countries. How has that changed your calculus? The fact that the virus was here 2 months ago, and now it's mostly in Latin America. Did you know that was going to happen? Did you expect that?
Yeah, I think we expected it. Of course, in the beginning, maybe when there was an outbreak, was only in China. Then I think we watched it, but I think as it started to spread into Europe and then US, and you could see, I think we were very early in putting a complete travel ban in place, to put the crisis committee up in the company in each and every country, to be prepared. And as you say, right now it's quite tough situations. If we take Peru, for example, is still in a complete lockdown. South Africa has been in a complete lockdown. So of course we are monitoring this, and it's changing also, changing day by day, I must say. So it's not, what happens one day can be changed the day after. So it is a very, the transparency of what you have in front of you is very, it's not clear.
Yeah,
and I think you need
I'll ask you maybe 2 final questions on the coronavirus, and then we move to your personal and your career story. I should maybe ask also if you could center the camera a little bit so we can see all of you, or at least most of you. So first of all, is Epiroc okay? Are the people that work at Epiroc, are they all fine? How is the company doing, and how are its people doing?
No, so we are of course prioritizing the health of our people, and we need, since we have so much people out in the world and located at the mining sites, we need to follow the rules and the local, regulations. So the first priority is the health of our employees, and we have taken a number of measures too. But we have also, I think, like all companies, employees infected. And of course, then you need to be very, clear with quarantine rules, and you need to be, try to do everything you can to protect, of course, help the people infected to get better again, but also make sure that you don't spread the virus further.
Yeah. So you took those quarantine measures, of course, where it was needed to protect your employees, to protect the well-being of society. Now, to which level of operations have you fallen back, and at which level are you now? So, for example, we saw that economic activity fell back X%, and now it's moving back up in countries like China. How's the situation for Epiroc?
So if we look in general, the output in mining in April was down between 10 to 15%. So that is a supply disruption in the whole mining market globally, and it's across all commodities. So it has nothing really to do with the commodity prices. So if you look on gold, for example, which is actually up 13% in price compared to beginning of the year, is still down.
So output prices can fluctuate independently almost of production levels.
Yeah.
And so you said it's been down about 10 to 15% in the month of April. That's generally across the sector. And then, of course, there are some implications for the company too. When do you expect, what's your scenario that you believe in? When do you think you'll go back to 95% capacity?
I think what we see in May now is ease of restrictions, mobility restrictions. Borders are opening up, complete lockdowns are taken away, which is good. But I think it will take time. Before the full supply chain starts to, the wheels start to turn again. It will take time. So I think it's extremely difficult to actually tell when we will be back to the new normal, and of course depending on will there be a second wave.
And you said I have to believe in a certain scenario. What's the scenario you believe in?
We believe that the mining companies will be more hesitant in placing equipment order, and that there will be an impact on the actual production level. So and then of course you need to just to put a number down and then adjust the cost structure accordingly.
Of course, and we'll get back to that later on in the conversation when we talk about your experience, because as you said, you've had the experience before, at least that need to adjust revenues and costs. But I want to take people now a little bit back down. Could you call it memory lane? At least your memory lane, back in time. So when you were probably the age of the students, we've got a lot of students with us today that I think are somewhere between 20 and 25 years old. So I want to go back to your time when you started your career, and start maybe where you're from, because I think you're from a small town in Sweden, Härnösand, if I'm correct. Is that right?
Yeah, small town. Grew up in a normal middle class family. Spent my time with, playing music, hanging out with friends, a lot of golfing. I did not spend a lot of time studying, to be honest.
Yeah. So an everyday youth, you said, I really loved music, playing music, and you weren't necessarily thinking of studying, also because in your family, nobody had gone to college before you.
No, true. So the plan was more to say maybe be a teacher in music.
And so at some point, then you say, the D-Day is coming, the day you have to make a decision. What am I going to do after high school? And then you decided, after all, I will try to go to college, and not just that, I will try to study engineering, which is, of course, as we all know, a very difficult study, and you have to do an entrance exam. What made you decide in the end, I'm going to do it anyway?
Well, to be honest, I was quite, I had very vague understanding of what I wanted to become. It could have been a teacher, music, math, dentist, or engineer. So I was quite confused, to be honest. But it ended up, I managed to get into the Royal Institute of Technology in Stockholm. And of course, the first couple of months, that was quite a shock because I had not really spent a lot of time studying. So I had to step up quite a lot during my first years there at the university.
I mean, it's a difficult study. I never managed to do a real engineering, so I can understand. What is it? A teacher? Is it a parent? Is it somebody that you've seen? What made you say, you know what? I'm not going to do music. I'm going to do engineering. It's a very different choice.
So my father worked in the industry, during all my life, and I think I joined him many times to work, and of course, during dinners, we had a lot of debates about the company, and he was the production manager, so I really enjoyed those discussions at home. So I think that played a role in them, that I actually decided to become an engineer and not a musician.
and give it a shot. It's not easy, but you actually made it through. You became an engineer.
Yeah.
And then as everyone, and many of the people on the line, of course, as well, after college, then you have to make a choice. Now, what am I going to do? I'm going to do some work. And you actually chose for a rather, I think, if you've done engineering, a rather straightforward choice, which is to go in product development, work in an engineering company. And as a matter of fact, your job was to weld flax core wire. I look a little bit strangely because I don't even know what that means.
So that is the consumable that you use when you're welding stainless steel. So I did product development of flux core wire for 4 years.
Yeah, and so very straightforward beginning of your career. You've studied to be an engineer. You know how it is to make develop a product. That's what you've done for 4 years. Very normal beginning, right?
Yeah.
And then you said, I think it's time for a step up, or at least I'm going to give it a try. I'm going to give it a shot. That's a crucial step from being a specialist to being a manager. And it's a big shift that everyone needs to make somewhere, between around their 30 or so. Many people make that step. How did you get that first manager position?
Also, I applied for it was a small manager position in Atlas Copco at that time, also within engineering, which was close then to what I had done. But I think I wanted really to say make a larger impact. I think that was maybe the reason why I applied. But of course, I had no clue if I was going to be successful as a leader. You need to try, and I think it was actually a quite good move to start small. I had, I think, 7 or 10 guys in the beginning. That was, a good.
Right. So, I mean, what makes it, a little less scary, I suppose, is the fact that 1, you stay within your field, which is product development, engineering, and 2, sure, you become a manager, but it's only a handful of people, right? Now, of course, as with any first job, there's going to be challenges, and you told me about a very interesting challenge that you faced, particularly simply because you were a woman, which was that there was one person in your team, you said, who told you straight up, I don't want to work for a woman. How do you deal with that?
No, but and that was the first day. So of course that was, I think I at the age of 25, 26 maybe, that was a tough one. But you also, you need to decide, who is going to be the strongest in this. And I think I just decided, no way, I have got this position because I'm competent, and I will continue in this position. So of course it's it's tough to hear that, but you need to stay strong.
Yeah, and you had that confidence because you said, hey, listen, I paid my dues. I did 4 years of product development. I applied for the job. I was the best candidate. I was chosen for the job because I was the best. I'm the boss. And you said to him, this is what it is. You report to me.
Yep.
And that's how it was.
Yep. For many years.
For many years. So you went from, now you're a manager at 26 years old, which is quite impressive, and you've been in that position for a number of years, as you said, and then you moved up. You moved up after 8 years. You became the vice president, still in product development, the vice president though of research and development, and now you really have a global role. So now you work with people in India, in the US, in China, in South Africa, really engineers all over the world. How did that challenge, how did you meet that challenge?
Of course, it added a complexity. You had the distance, you had to learn how to interact and follow up, put processes in place, stay close even though you are far away, and also, of course, learn the culture differences. How do you manage a team in India compared to a team in China and the Americans? It's all, we'll say, different ways of tackle it. But those were very, let's say, developing years for myself, also understanding how to lead in a global context.
Yeah, and of course there's a lot of cultural differences. You described one situation where you were talking to a team of a team in China, and you didn't really get feedback on what you were trying to explain from how they reacted, because they didn't really react. I don't understand. They don't have that direct confrontational culture. So how do you approach a situation like that when you don't have that visual sort of connection with people, and they don't give you that feedback that you were expecting in your cultural context?
No, so I was standing there in front of the team and I asked, you know, are you on board? Do you understand? You know, is this the right way to go for us? And I had, like I said, you know, no feedback at all. And I was like, come on, you know, I want you to speak up. And it was still dead quiet. But then I realized, okay, maybe I need to do this in different ways. So I took them one by one and sit down in one room and explained. And then slowly, I got the feedback, which I needed. And I felt like, you know, I'm not leaving if I don't get the feedback from the team, because that, for me, that's how you make sure that they are on board.
Yeah. So it's an interesting balance that you then strike between leaning into another culture, because, you know, you're not going to change anyone's culture and you have to respect that. You work with a global team on the one hand, and on the other hand, staying true, of course, to yourself and your own beliefs. And you said one important aspect from how I am as a person, as a manager, as a leader, is I'm values driven. So I'm going to adapt to people, but I will always stay true to my values.
Yes. Yeah, I'm very value driven.
Yeah. And so one of the things that you find important, as an example, is that you make sure that people believe, as you do, in what you do.
Yeah.
And so you say, what that means is that until I know that people believe in it, I want to make sure that I spend enough time explaining things over and over and over again.
Yeah, I spend enormous amount of time explaining why we're doing things. And for me, that is that is of course a process, but it is the way to make sure that I have the team on board and that people understand and really believe in why we're doing things. Because that's how you really create change, in my opinion.
Yeah. Because of course you need to make sure that people, you know, are also motivated for the mission of the company, for the changes that the company wants to make. And in order to do so, you say the most important thing that I found is that you have to internalize why we're doing things. It's very interesting. Now, while you were VP of Research and Development and you had that global role, one thing you always did also, you said, is I always raised my hand when there was work to be done. And that led you to get other opportunities as well beyond your role of VP of Research and Development. For example, you said you were involved in a lot of the M&A, the mergers and acquisitions of the company at the time.
No, I liked that strategic, let's say, challenge around M&A early, even though I did not really have a natural place in that M&A team, but I raised my hand, as you said, and I said, I want to be part, I want to understand, I want to learn. You know, I was part of many due diligence, which was, you know, great learnings. You have the chance to deep dive into another company, understand the strategic rationale, the fit with our company, etc. So the whole process, you know, I'm a curious person, so I think that's why I also, you know, I like to learn. So I really like that.
And so, of course, you know, a very big company. You were working at the time for Atlas Copco, one of those huge industrial giants, global giants, and at a time, of course, when it did buy other companies, it did merge with other companies, and so that was a very crucial role. Now, you said that was also the time at which I was able to turn that perceived, you know, the fact that I was a woman, I could turn that around into a strength, and the fact that I was often the only woman or the first woman in that team, the M&A team, you were the first and only woman. How did you turn that into an advantage?
Now, many times when we were sitting around, you know, when we had done the due diligence and it was time for a decision, and we walked around the table, and everyone was supposed to give their judgment. Should we go or not go? You know, I was very often the only one that said no. I think I was more, let's say, careful taking risks. I had different views, different angles to things, and of course, you know, in many times, the team, you know, went to, you know, we did it anyway, of course, because the rest of the team wanted it to do it, and I was the only one saying no. But I think my manager at that time, he really saw that I was questioning things, and I came with a different perspective. And I think that helped me to get the positions I got afterwards.
Yeah. And so the objective fact is you're different.
Yes.
Right? and subjective also, but objective, certainly you stand out because you're the only woman in that team. And you say, that's the fact, but it doesn't mean because I'm the only one or I'm different that I'm not valuable. As a matter of fact, it's the other way around. And I choose to interpret it that way, namely the fact that because I'm a woman and I'm the only woman, that makes me, that's my special strength.
Yep.
How does that, now we know that of course in some companies you can imagine that, you're in a consumer goods company, it's very easy to see, you have to understand the taste of the consumer, and for that reason you need to know the consumer, and for example it's good to have a diverse team. How does that play out in mining? I mean, like, how is it an advantage to be a woman in mining?
Of course, the mining industry has been very male dominated for many years, but it is turning. If I go back 20 years ago, it was very few women in the industry. If I look now, I think all mining houses, all mining equipment manufacturers, everyone understand the benefit of inclusion and diversity. So there is a big push now, and I think the technology shifts that we are in the middle of, with automation, electrification, and digitalization. I think it can attract different people today than maybe 20, 30 years ago when mining was still dark and dangerous. Today it's high tech. We are putting 5G underground, and we are running fully autonomous machines.
Right.
And that's of course exciting stuff, and I think it attracts a broader and more diverse workforce.
Yeah, I mean that's the case, of course. For example, you see that in manufacturing too, as things automate, the physical job, the blue collar job, very often becomes less exclusive, so to speak. Yeah, it doesn't depend so much on physical strength anymore, and it enables other people to join into the business. But in terms of when you decide to do a merger and acquisition, in a mining company, how does it? I mean, do you remember, for example, one situation in which you really were the only one who had a different perspective, and say that really is a good example?
Yeah. No, but still, even if you say, I have one view and the rest of the team have a different view. When you leave as a team, and then you're on board. So you can have your own opinion, of course, in the closed room. But when you leave as the management team, and then you stand behind the decision. So then, of course, I need to argue for as part of the team, and not as myself as individual. So I think that is always the balance, But I think the important thing is the debate, and I think here I have always lifted, the difficult discussions on the table. I have always wanted us to reflect and learn, even when we do mistakes, what can we learn from this mistake? And I think over the years, I think I've been, sometimes quite a pain, to be honest, in some of the management teams, because I brought up all these painful, topics, and wanted really to debate them. Because
that's something that you hear, of course, is that the more male style, and maybe that translates in mergers and acquisitions. There's a strong belief, yes, we're right, we're going to make this a success, euphoria, and then you're the critical voice that says, well, hold on, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? And that's perhaps where it sort of plays out.
Yeah, you're the party killer.
but very, very useful and crucial role. Now, after you were vice president of R&D, you said, I've done it also a number of years, and now you spent, more than a decade, probably 2 decades in product development, and you say, what, it's time for something else. And I think we, many of us have that after a while. You're like, what, I think it's time for something different. I want out. I've worked for one company for a very long time, and it's that typical moment where you have to say, am I going to stay or am I going to go? How was that for you? That moment where you had to decide, I'm kind of tired of this. I think I want to go. What was that like?
Yeah, so I looked at other positions within engineering, at other companies at that time. But then, and that was of course a safe thing to do. Do exactly the same thing at another company. But then an opportunity came up as general manager for one of the largest production sites we have in Sweden, which was of course scary, as you say. It was something completely outside the comfort zone, and I applied and I got the job. So that was, I think, from now in hindsight, I think that was maybe the most important move I did, to move away from, R&D is a support function, and move into the actual operational flow where you actually feel the heat every hour.
Yeah, and you said that, and you said, it was a very difficult move, and a very unusual move. You went from a certain vertical, if you will, you call it a support function, which is R&D, to general management, and being responsible for an entire factory from the shop floor to the sales, the entire P&L, right? And you say it was a very difficult decision. It was scary for me to take that on. I mean, I understand, but if I hadn't done that, I wouldn't have been able, looking back, wouldn't have been able to grow to become the CEO of a company, because you really need that diversity of experience.
Yeah, no, and I really learned the difference. When you are in engineering, you can investigate things, and you can sit in meetings, and you can take a decision 2 weeks from now or 3 weeks from now. In production, you need to take a decision based on very little information every hour, because every lost hour is a lost hour, and especially we were running 5 shifts, so 24/7. So every hour is a lost hour. So and that puts the pressure on us. So as I learned I learned the speed in decision making during those years.
Yeah, and it's something that you've embraced over time. You said you became somebody who was result oriented in those years, and who was focused on making decisions.
Yes.
Right. You don't linger. Now, that certainly became even more clear when you made your next step in your career, which is to go from the general manager of one factory to being general manager of a whole division of 15 factories. And you said, enormous difference in scale. Went from one factory to 50 factories, from 800 people to 4,500 people. And then moreover, I had to do it at a time when that cycle that we talked about before was coming to an end, the positive cycle. The winter was coming in, and you had to cut costs. I mean, how do you do that? Now you have to do 10 times more people or 5 times more people, and you come in with the message, I'm your new president, and by the way, day one, we're going to do cost cutting.
Yeah. No, so that was of course a tough challenge, but I think you need to balance it. So you need to be very clear of the long-term strategy, and you need to both invest and cut at the same time. So I invested in R&D. I set up a purchase department, for example, to make sure that we could lower the cost for the raw material. At the same time, we were closing 4 factories, and we were taking out 800 people. So, and that is what I think you need to really trust your strategic direction there, and dare to invest and cut at the same time. And of course, the organization is putting enormous pressure on you when you invest at the same time and questioning why you are investing. But that, I think, for me, that has always been, and then maybe back to that, I'm simplifying things always. And for me, that is quite clear then, you can't only cut, then you destroy the long term. So you also need to invest for the future.
But it's a concept that I mean, of course, the way you explain makes sense, but it's not that obvious. You say, I cut and I invest. I mean, that's plus and it's minus. Those 2 things are opposite to each other.
Yeah,
right?
You just need to make sure that you cut more than you invest.
And I mean, that's what it is, isn't it? Because if you just cut, then you need to cut 20%, you cut 20%. Now, if you say, I want to invest 10%, well, then you got to cut 30%.
Exactly.
But you say, that's exactly what you got to do. Because if you want to accelerate afterwards, if you want to grow after the crisis is over, or after that cycle ends, the new normal is not going to be the old normal. And so you have to invest in new capacities, in new skills, in new products. And that's why you do it.
Yeah.
We're almost at the end of the conversation, of the journey, if you will, and we'll pull in a couple of questions from students. But before we do, we have to get to the big culmination of that career, which is you went from from division president to business area president. Basically, now you're part of the top management of that huge company, and now you're responsible for 15,000 employees globally. And you come into that role, you say, I'm Helena Hedblom, I'm now part of a general manager, I made it, but what happens 2 weeks into your new job, a big surprise.
Yeah, so the board of directors of Atlas Copco decided to split the company into 2 listed companies. So 2 weeks into the role, I ended up in the middle of that, which was of course something extraordinary. So we had 12 months to split the company. A company that has been together for
more than 100 years,
140 years. And you can just imagine all the IT systems, all the locations, all the people, it was a massive project to split all of it, create a new brand promise, rebrand the whole thing everywhere in 150 countries, create new legal structures, transfer all the employees,
new corporate culture, perhaps.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, that's it. I've had this a number of times before. Every time that I made a step up, I had to learn new things, and this is what I'll have to learn, which is to build a new company.
No, I
and
think
you just do it.
Yeah, and I think what I learned during that year, is more than I have learned the last years. It was an amazing journey. I think now in hindsight, I think all of us that were part of this, it was a fantastic experience. Of course, a lot of learning is also that sometimes you just need to let go, because it was so much changes happening in parallel. So at one point you really lose control of the communication, because it's so massive, ongoing everywhere. But you just need to trust that when you're doing the right things, we will come out in a good way, and trust that the people also understand that it's extraordinary circumstances.
Yeah. And it's such a massive change, by the way, that my curtain spontaneously fell down when I heard what you were saying. But that's all right. Helena, you did it really well. I mean, like, you're now 3 years into that new role, and now, of course, you're the CEO of that listed company on NASDAQ. Epiroc, of course, like every other company, is facing the crisis. But you say, I've been there before. I have the confidence, and we will get through it again this time around.
Yeah.
Thank you for that testimony of your career. I mean, like, we've gone all the way from you being in a small town in Sweden playing the piano, to being the CEO of a major company. It was an amazing journey. But you've inspired some people that are attending, and I want to maybe turn to them now and allow them to ask some questions. And I want to maybe turn first to Oliver Okello, who's actually here in Geneva. I'm in Geneva too, and who had a question for you about specifically what it meant to be a woman in business and a leader. Okay, Oliver, why don't you go ahead? And I think we're just going to unmute you. Just 1 second before there we go. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Oliver Okello. I'm a DBS student in Geneva campus, Switzerland. My question is, the mining industry traditionally draws talent from the STEM discipline, which is mainly male-dominated. What is your organization's strategy to promote diversity and encourage more women representation?
Thank you.
Thank you. So diversity and inclusion is extremely high up on the agenda. As I said, maybe 20 years ago in the mining industry, that was not the case, but surely that is the case right now. As Epiroc, we have set ambitious goals now for 2030 to double the number of women in operational roles. And of course, this is a lot about supporting and growing the women we have in the organization. So we are running every year a female mentorship program, for example, where young women in the organization, they are getting mentored by executive and senior managers, and that has been very, very appreciated. So we are doing a lot of things, and also would say moving people. We have a lot of talented women in finance, for example, or in other support functions. So we are also doing a number of moves, we'll say, from finance into operations, and giving the opportunity to the strong ladies we have in the organization also to take that step, so to say.
Yeah. And so maybe one of the lessons also for people who are starting their career now is to pay attention to the plans that companies have, and whether or not they believe in diversity, whether they believe in inclusion. And you mentioned, at Epiroc, you will see that because we invest in that. And that's something that people who might want to join a company like yours should pay attention to. Does a company really walk the talk on that front?
Yeah. And for myself, it's more, I have always believed in diversity in all aspects. So gender and culture and age and your experience, I've always built very diverse teams. And if I look on the, we have 33 nationalities among our top managers.
Yeah, and I mean that's absolutely incredible, and of course it remains a challenge in many industries and in many companies. We also have a question online. Thank you, by the way, Oliver, for raising that issue first with all of us. But we also have a question from another student, Jane Oma, and she says, you shared how you grew to the position of leadership or CEO, being the only woman almost in the industry at that time, which is very inspiring. Now, she asks, Jane, how can women who are, and you just touched on that subject, how can women who are from minority groups navigate around issues of discrimination, whether it's gender discrimination, religious discrimination, race, or even family relationship? You lead a global company. What advice can you offer on that front?
No, but I think of course you need to pay attention to if the company really believes in inclusion and in diversity, and then also pick your leaders. I think it's extremely important to work for someone that actually want you to grow, that invest in you and see your talent, and then of course also show that you are prepared to take on more responsibilities. As I said, raise your hand and jump into a project on top of what you're already doing. Make yourself available and apply for positions so that the recruiting manager sees that this is someone with a strong willingness to take the next step. I think it's extremely important to show that confidence, that you are prepared to take the next step.
Yeah.
Even if you don't have the chance, right at that time, but eventually it will come.
Yeah. Now, of course, one of the issues may be that that you may turn out to be working for a manager who's racist or who's sexist. So then, of course, you can raise your hand all you want, but you're not going to get ahead.
Or then pick another manager, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, but that's it. I mean,
you will never get. You need the support by your superior. You need healthy leadership in a company. So I would also look into. I'm a strong believer in healthy leadership. I focused all my years in leadership. Really, I'm a people person. I strongly believe that companies with strong leadership culture, that's a healthy work environment, and then you don't end up in situations like you describe. So watch out, because there are places where it's not allowed to work to do like that. So also be picky in picking what company you want to work for.
It's almost like you say, before you start work for a company, as you do the applications, remember, it's not just you interviewing for a job, it's also the company, interviewing to earn that you get to work for them.
Sure. So I think the company values must be, the same as your own values. For me, that has been, I think that's the reason why I spent, more than 20 years in the same company.
Yeah. So that's one way that we can learn from you, and we should look also at the company that we decide to work for. I want to turn perhaps to Jennifer now, Jennifer Kundig, who's in Zurich. Jennifer, you had a question about the type of leadership or the type of leader that Helena is, I think.
Hello, so Helena Hedblom. Very nice to meet you virtually. I actually kind of got a feeling what kind of leader you are, and I think it's very inspiring. But I would like to ask you if you think your technical or engineering background helped you in being a leader, as in understanding better the problems and the industry, and what do you think of leaders with no technical background?
So I think in the beginning, of course, when I was leading engineers, then of course it was, you have to be an engineer more or less to lead engineers. So I think maybe during the first 10 years, it was an advantage to be an engineer because you need to recruit, that type of competence, and you need to understand, if you have the right competence or not, for example, in the team. But when I moved over to production, then I would say at that point, which was quite a long time ago now, then it's not really about being the technical skills any longer. Then it was, I think I got that position only because I had my leadership capabilities. So since then, I would say it's only about leadership, and more, of course, let's say, strategic capabilities. It becomes more and more strategy the higher up you come, and of course that you need to be brutal in execution.
Thank you, Helena, for that. And you talk about the type of leader that you are, and we get follow-up questions, by the way, from Jane. She loved your response, and she said, how can we teach more leaders to think the way you think? You know what I mean? Like, what I mean, of course, you've done it through experience. You've gone up through the ranks. You've seen what worked, what didn't work. You had that guy that worked for you, and he said, "I don't want to work for women." And you said, "You know what? The best response, I think, is to lead with confidence." But how can we teach other leaders to think like you, and how can we learn to think like you?
But I think it also has to do with diversity, because you need, or an inclusion, you need a diverse team. I'm not sure that it's about gender. It's about really paying attention to really strong leaders and leadership capabilities, and promote that. Very often in companies, it is the best engineer that becomes the R&D manager, and there may be someone extremely skilled in production technique that becomes the production manager. And I've seen that many times as well, and it's seldom so well functioning teams around. And I think that also has to do with how high up is leadership on the agenda in the company. For myself, it has been one of the highest priority. I always say that if you don't have a strong leadership, you can't handle whatever happens. If I have the strongest leaders I can find on this earth report in my team, then we will tackle whatever situation that we will be in. And I think if it's growth, if it is an M&A, or we need to close down something, we will as a team then manage it. So I think it has to do with also if the culture in the company is believes in modern leadership.
Yeah. Now, of course, you need good leaders, but the good leaders need to make good decisions. And one of the people who's on the line also asked that question. If you look back at the decision that you've had to make as a leader, what would you say is the most challenging decision that you've had to make as a CEO or as a leader?
I think every time I've been standing in front of employees and closing down a factory, for example. I've done that many times, and that is painful, really painful, because it's people that have been giving their life to the company, and still you need to take that decision, but that's the toughest part, I would say.
How does it? You said you're very value driven. When you have to, you say when you lay off people who've given their life, you say, to the company. How does that reflect the fact that you're values driven? If nevertheless you go ahead and you put people on the street that have been working their entire life, does that mean that you give them a good severance package? Does it mean you give them a lot of appreciation, respect? I mean, how do you reflect that your value is driven in a moment like that?
No, but I think when you are in the middle of that, you need really to show respect, and you need also to clearly that they can see that it is painful for you. I think it's also, if you're honest and they can see that this is painful, if I could have, taken another decision, I would have taken it. But then, of course, you need to, take care of the people in the best way you can, as you say, with severance package, etc., and try to help them to find another position.
Yeah. Now, we're of course going through a crisis. We talked about it at length in the beginning of this conversation, but Carmen de Lange in the campus in Barcelona has a question also about, I think, COVID-19. I'm going to see, Carmen, if we can get to your question, if we can unmute you.
Hi, Helena. Thank you for joining us today. I just have a question. It's not COVID related. I would just like to know, on behalf of our student Gololo, he asked, would you do anything differently if you could start your career over again?
No, I don't think I would have done anything different. Of course, when in hindsight, maybe I should have picked my battles. I think I've maybe been in a couple of battles that I could have avoided if I would have had more experience. So maybe that is the only thing. I think I still would, if I would have given the opportunity to do what I do today, I have loved all my positions. I really enjoyed my different roles in my career. And I have, as we said, you know, I've never planned for next step. I've always been in the job and try to do my best, improving things. That has been.
Now, you know, I got to say, it is very impressive when we talk to you. Like, you are, I mean, extremely confident now. Because, I mean, of course, you're a CEO, so I understand that you would be confident today. But one of the, because, you know, you're leading a company, doing it very successfully. But surely along the way, and this is also a question from Diego Sosa in Mexico. He says, you know, how do you manage fear or insecurity when you, at the time when you were the only person who was saying no in your team, when you weren't yet the CEO and you didn't yet know I'm a leader? How do you deal with those thoughts of fear and anxiety and insecurity?
No, but I think you need to try to overcome it. And of course, it's you know, when you are in the situation, it's you know, it's scary, and it's not feeling so say comfortable inside your body. But I think, you know, you need to find a way to stay calm and relaxed, and maybe not take things so serious. You know, I think you also need to, you know, keep your foot on the ground and be the, you know, you're a private person as well, and you have a private life and friends and families, etc. And not blow the situation up so it becomes so bloody important. I think you know, try to, because then also I've always say to myself, you know, what's the worst case? You know, if I, you know,
people follow my advice.
Yeah. No,
it is what it is.
Yeah, and I very often think that I want to be able to look myself into the mirror and in the evening, and I want to be able to tell myself that I've been honest. I've been telling my view in different debates, and that's what has maybe kept me
going in those moments of insecurity. You know, you touched upon it in the very beginning when we talked about where you're from. You said, I come from a small town, but from a loving family, and I love to play music. Do you think that those you know, those experiences growing up, you know, your love for music, you know, your love for the outside, being around people and family, is that something that you can sort of tap into again and sort of get also strength from?
Yeah, for sure. I love listening to music. I'm not playing in an orchestra today. I spend most of my time doing yoga now, you know, when I'm not leading the company. But for sure, I think, you know, you need to have something to, you know, outside, something that keeps you on the ground, so to say, you know, so you're not become too much in your head.
And it's something that you've really focused on. You said, you know, in the preparation conversation, that, you know, it's important to have balance. It's important to keep on having fun, even if you're, you know, in stressful situations, that you're sometimes able to turn off, you know, that professional hat and go back to your regular life. Of course, you say all of that, and I mean, I have no doubt about it. You know, somebody who shows up very early in the morning and goes home very late, but nevertheless, you know, you find it important to have a balance.
Yes, absolutely.
And
without that, it's not possible. You know, I would say that, you know, to have a role like I have today, you know, I do yoga every night now. So that's, of course, you need to plan and be able to say you need to prioritize your own health at the same time. Otherwise,
and that's for you. That's the moment. The yoga is, you know, the 45 minutes of yoga or hour. You empty your head. You know, you're focused on your body, on yourself, and not the worries outside and the company and all of those things. Now, of course, you are leading as we discussed, a major company in mining. And one of the other questions that we get from Leopold Storp, one of the students as well, he says, you know, the world, of course, has, and we know this, limited natural resources. And so obviously, when you're a company that's delivering equipment to mining, in a way, you're helping exploit or extract those limited resources. What's your exit strategy, or what's your diversification strategy, knowing that right now your success depends on us extracting those limited natural resources?
Also, of course, I would say the recycling trend, that is a clear trend, and I think we as a world need to embrace recycling more and more. We also have products for recycling, so we have hydraulic attachment for recycling and demolition tools as well. But of course, also the mining industry, surface mines will have to go underground in the future, and underground mines will have to go deeper, which is good for us because then you need our equipment, and you need to drill because the grade is also declining. So if the world will want to continue with the growth we have, with everything, more or less everything we have around us comes, from some type of metal that needs to be mined. So I think, but I think our view of doing this is, of course, that historically the mining industry has not maybe been the most sustainable industry, but we have really taken a pride in being part of transforming the mining industry into sustainable industry. So we are right now developing battery electrical equipment, for example, for our full underground fleet, which is massive, 42-ton trucks, fully electrical. Which I think will really help our customers on their journey also towards a more sustainable business.
Yeah. Now imagine that we do go to that, let's say the cyclical economy, or the circular economy rather, and indeed we get most of our natural resources not from the mines, but we get them from reuse. We get them from the landfall areas. That of course would be a sea change for a company that's used to building huge machinery to drill down and excavate into a mine. Would you be ready for that transformation if it were to occur in your tenure as CEO? I mean, like, what do you make? And these tiny little machines that go into a belt and look for some resources in a landfall, or what?
Yeah, but I think if you look at, we'll say, 20-40 years perspective, mining will still be there at a large scale, so recycling will not be, let's say, the solution for everything. It will be a solution for part of the solution, but it will not be the solution for everything. But then of course it's all about also, let's say, picking what commodities you want to be in. For example, if we take the copper commodity, copper is needed for the transformation into electrical vehicles. So without more copper mines, then we can't transition. We can't go away from diesel engines, in all the car industries. So it's all tied together in a way.
Yeah. We're almost sadly at the end of our conversation, but I do want to end with one question, which I think is quite important. It's from Gideon Eromosele Aigbe, and he asks, you've talked about when you were young and when you didn't really have a clear view of, I'm going to study this or I'm going to work there, basically on your future career. So what advice can you now give undergraduates or graduates like the people in our audience who are still unclear about their choice of career? How should we decide to pursue a career?
I think pick an education where you have a lot of opportunities, where you're not too narrow in your possibilities, because I think it is difficult, when you're young, to really understand also what opportunities you have. So pick. I would recommend to pick something that is as broad as possible, and then try it out. Try a specialist role, or try a private small company or a large corporation, and find your spot. But as I said, have fun. Pick a company that shares your values, and have fun.
And of course, if it doesn't work out, if you're not having fun, dare to change.
Exactly, dare to change. It's not end of the world,
No, and we have a long career. You've had a long career. The people that are in this call will have an even longer career. We all turn 100 years old. That's of course something that we'll remember. And to end, I should note, if you had wanted to become the CEO of Epiroc of the beginning of your career, well, that would not have been possible because the company didn't yet exist.
No, exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
I think that's a good lesson for all of us, that it's okay to be agnostic in the beginning of our career. Thank you so much, Helena, for sharing all of your insights. We've gotten a lot of feedback from viewers and students who loved what you had to say. Very inspiring, and I'm sure they'll want to follow your footsteps. And now that you've told us how to do it, what are the secrets? I'm sure we're better equipped to do that. So thank you so much, Helena, and over to Luc.
Yes, thank you very much, Helena. Let me join Peter. I think your session has been really inspiring for our students. It has been kind of a leadership session for them that they have covered in class. So thank you for sharing your time. Thank you for sharing your vision. And you set an example for the entire EU community. Next, for our students, in 2 weeks' time, we will have Dan Straven from Chief Economist from Goldman Sachs, other series, other leader sharing his view. Stay safe, everybody, and don't forget to join us. Thank you.